I'm CEO of a business called Woolovers, and Woolovers has been going sort of 27 years now. It was set up by husband and wife back in 1989, and actually set up in at country shows and events. It started at exactly the same time as Tom Jules started Jules, and Jules has gone on a stratosphere in terms of growth and just recently listed as well, been very successful. Woolovers probably hasn't had that same trajectory, but we still have a business today that's around £25 million in sales. It's got no stores. We only sell online and through a catalogue, and we sell into international markets where a third of our sales are now internationally based. The business focuses on knitwear, as the name sort of sounds, and the one difference in terms of our USP is all around the fact that we focus on 100% yarn, natural yarn products. We don't use any synthetic materials in any of our garments. So we actually manufacture, they're under our own label, and we sell direct to the consumer. And the business was purchased about 15 months ago by private equity, and the husband and wife team sort of took a step back, became minority shareholders, and we brought in a professional management team, and I was recruited in sort of 3 months after the acquisition. How did the business start growing internationally? Well, there's a great story here in terms of the focus from the original owner. Our business is based not far away from Brighton, and he was always in a local pub, and I would meet some sort of character, and that character would be French, German, Spanish, whoever, and he'd basically offer them a job and say, come and set up a website and come and work for me. And some of those people did, and we ended up with 9 websites. And when I got there, all 9 websites had their own individual issues. None of them were done very well in terms of the mechanics and the operational issues around customer proposition, user experience, local payments, delivery, returns, all the operational inhibitors that you saw David from Decades talk about earlier, which was a great talk, I thought. And so we had a lot of challenges in terms of where do we focus, what do we do? And we'd lost some of those individual channel managers who I would call glorified translators. They weren't really focused on customer acquisition or customer retention or trading the websites. They were just going through the motions of translating the content from the UK website, translating emails. There was no specific email targeting to different markets, and then probably putting sort of free delivery messages on to try and drive traffic at different times during different promotional periods. So having that strategic challenge, we started to look at which were the core sites that we wanted to focus on. And funnily enough, our biggest single market outside the UK is Australia. And you'd have thought, you know, Australia's nice hot climate, not many requirements for selling jumpers to Australia, but sure enough there is. And I'm told if you go to Melbourne in winter, it can be quite nasty and quite cold. Not that I've personally been to Melbourne in winter. So, you know, we looked at Australia and we started to focus and say, well, how are we going to serve Australia? And then we looked at some of the other markets, and if I name those markets that we were actually trading in, we were trading in Russia, which is a pretty complex place to trade. We were also trading in France and Germany and having to do the language translations for France, Germany and Russia. And we were also trading in the US with a dedicated website, Canada, a dedicated website, and New Zealand, a dedicated website, and Ireland, a dedicated website as well. So we looked at that and we said, well, first thing we need to do is to make those propositions work. And how do we do that? So we started to look at payments, and we put in a global payment provider because the business wasn't PCI compliant either, and that took us a period of time to do. We re-platformed our international websites, and we put in Adyen, who are outside, I think, exhibiting today. And Adyen provide all of the API links into all of the payment methods around the globe. So suddenly in France we had Carte Bleue. Suddenly in Germany we started having direct debit. which we never had previously. And lo and behold, we saw the numbers of sales increase just from that very, very simple exercise of putting a international payment engine in. We then started to focus and say, well, how are we serving these markets in terms of delivery? We were sending everything Royal Mail untracked, and surprisingly enough, we were getting a lot of returns because parcels weren't getting there, and we were getting a lot of losses in terms of parcels being lost on the way as well. And it's not great because with customer services were being bombarded, and we had to hire international speaking customer service agents to handle those queries. And so we had lots of issues around customer service as well, trying to actually focus on that, and lots of issues around delivery. So we put in a proper delivery structure into those key markets that we decided to focus in on. A tracked service, a little bit more expensive, but faster and tracked. And again, we saw an improvement in sales, unsurprisingly. We then looked at some key markets. So I don't know if anyone ships to Canada here, but Canada has a very, very low duty threshold. And it's a real troublesome market. And again, we were getting lots of parcels being turned away on the doorstep. And we were sort of confused a little bit about that. How do we do that? How do we integrate that? So we started looking around in the marketplace for something that would provide an international solution for those non-focused websites. We partnered with a business called Global E, who provide that, and basically they take over the checkout, and they also provide local pricing. They take over the checkout in terms of translating into different languages, and we basically ship the product to them, and they ship it to the customer, and they are the first line of customer service as well for those customers as well. So we don't have to have the hassle of the first line of customer service around where my parcel is. And because they're aggregating this for so many other organizations, they've got great shipping prices. We can choose the right shipping method for those different markets as well, and we get a great solution. And it's very, very low risk, and the full translation's done at checkout. So we now ship to 47 countries, and the beauty of it is where we took Canada away from the dedicated website, put it into the Global E platform, and the great thing there is that the customer is presented with a duty charge at checkout, so they can see how much duty they're going to be charged, and they can pay that duty up front, and they'll pay a discounted value if they pay that duty up front rather than actually paying it on the door. And of course, that means that we get less parcels being returned on the doorstep, and improves our conversion and improves the whole economics. So we've moved in 12 months from having 9 very disjointed, unloved, uncared for sites into a structured now where we've got focused core sites that we're focusing on, and we're putting marketing efforts into that, very similar to what David was saying at Decker's in terms of his chart. So we do have those focus sites. We then look at the engines, or the sort of availability of engines that we're going to put into those focus sites. We market them quite hard. We put dedicated emails into those markets. We have customer acquisition plans, retention plans, abandoned basket, as Klarna were talking about, and we're focused on those. And then the other strategy then is that anything that's further international, we take away that complication and we give that to Global E as our partner. And that's the journey we've been on in the last 12 months.
Hell of a journey.
Been a big journey.
Hell of a journey. Just covering a few issues around that then, just thinking about some of the strategic issues you face without having that store presence anywhere. How have you found establishing, if you like, the quality of what you're selling, which is a high-end or a higher-end product? How have you been able to establish trust and confidence in the consumer in these new markets that you've been going into?
Yeah, we have. I mean, I don't think there was any formal sort of trust being built up in those markets previously. It was mainly through word of mouth. So our products are very, very good quality, but great value. So if, we really want to be the M&S knitwear department, but better quality, and we're about 10 to 15% cheaper than M&S as well. And that's the market we've sort of stolen in the UK from M&S. And I think, the recommendations and the net promoter score that we have internationally is just fantastic. So people get our products, they love them, and they tell their friends, and the word spreads, and that's how we've tended to grow. Now we have dedicated sites. Obviously, we're translating content in some of those markets. So France and Germany, we've taken away a lot of the translation hassle. We've put an engine in called Motion Point that basically looks at our Irish site and it translates on the fly. And so it's a very intelligent system. It stores all the translations that we've made to date. And then as we change the Irish site, those sites get mirrored in local content. And so, you know, that happens, and it happens now, and we're not spending all that management time and resource just translating stuff, which is, you know, not really productive. And we've got something now that actually works. And Germany, for instance, you know, we've got trusted shops now, signed up to the trusted shops in terms of that logo. And we've spoken about Germany, I think, previously. You know, the Germans love to read terms and conditions. Something like 60% of customers in Germany read terms and conditions before they buy something. Something that doesn't happen in the UK. And so having those terms and conditions up front, easy to find, easy to follow, are very important in some markets. So I think, you know, tricks of the trade that I've learned through my experience in other businesses, when we've internationalized, you bring those to bear into those particular markets. And I think it is important, that trust element.
Yeah. So we're obviously living through our turbulence as we speak of where we in and out of. Obviously being British, you know, being British is part of you as a business or whatever. How are you leveraging that in these different markets? Is it something that you're using a lot, or is it something that's pretty much hidden and you're dealing individually?
So we haven't used it hard enough in the past, and we are now in the process. We've just actually rebranded today. So if you look today online, you'll see our new look and feel and tone and voice. You know, we're in the process of doing that. So I think, you know, where we're at is most of our product isn't made in Britain. Well, none of it's made in Britain, but it's all designed here. So, you know, we're using Australian and New Zealand fleeces for most of the products that we sell, which is the top quality fleeces. And we're designing that product and having that product made in Italy, Germany, Mauritius, and, you know, we've actually now spread our source of supply. So we are Britishizing our business in terms of that new design. So particularly in America and Australia, and we want to actually bring out the fact that we're using local products in Australia and New Zealand, but with a very strong British design. And that hits home with the Australian consumer. That is a real key niche. We've done some exit surveys in Australia, and that really does sort of deliver and tell us some of the elements of Britishness that are important. And obviously, the devaluation of the pound, which is ongoing and hasn't stopped, and seems to be going on every day, is great for international business. And you know, we're a lot more competitive now than we were. And who knows where Brexit will end and tariffs and everything else. But at the moment, you know, there's probably 2 years of fantastic opportunity internationally because of the uncertainty around the pound.
Yeah. Okay. You mentioned a lot of your operational issues being taken, if you like, to one side through Global A. I mean, how personalised are you in each different country as to payments and delivery methods and returns? Is it all completely bespoke by market now through them?
So we split. So I mean, Global he have all those relationships with delivery partners and a returns route as well in local markets, and they also have the different payment provisions in those markets as well. So they're all taken care of, and we don't have to worry about those. So we purely focus on those key 6 markets now that we have: Australia, France, Germany, the US, Ireland to a certain extent. And so we have now put in proper delivery channels. So we have express options now, standard options, tracked, etc. Different threshold amounts for free delivery. We have adding in terms of all those payment methods. So in France now we have carte bleue, which we didn't have before, etc. And Germany, I spoke about the direct debit methods as well, and we're looking at Klarna for Germany as well, so that we can do invoice on delivery. And so that is a journey of us sort of putting those things in place. One of the things you must never forget about is not just delivery, but having the proper returns route as well. You know, that is a real inhibitor for a customer if you don't have a proper, very clear returns route to market as well.
Okay. obviously you cover a lot of countries, 47 countries. If people are early in this journey of internationalization, maybe they're in 1, 2 countries or whatever, what would you say were the top tips that you give them to sort of say, well, you know, look at this before you get into that market, and when you're in that market, these are the things you should be focusing on?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the key things for me is, you know, having that sort of international relationship with Global E makes it very simple, because you can see which markets you potentially should focus on and may want to have a dedicated site going forward. So depending on where your brand is and where your brand is heading, and where you get the most customer traction, then that's a great way of understanding which market you might want to focus on. And so if you're suddenly doing fantastic business in the States, fantastic business in Australia, or fantastic business in France and Germany, through that platform, you can then say, well, okay, I might decide to focus on that. It might be worthwhile putting some management effort and time into it, you know, getting language specialists in for customer services or for trading or for acquisition or whatever you're focusing on. And you can then decide to really start to move that market forward. You can still do it within the Global E platform and not have that headache of fulfillment and returns and payments and all the rest of the things. But you know, you really do need, and David spoke about it earlier, you really need to do those. You need those operational 5 or 6 things per market to make that market work. So you're talking about payments, delivery, returns, localization, and then a dedicated marketing team or members of a team that are actually focused on driving that business.
Okay, just one final one from me that kind of follows on from that. You talk about localization and localization of content. How much are you having to find different models, or the extent to which you're having to localize your marketing, localize your content to some extent, product content, etc.? How deep are you getting in some markets with that?
So again, our core markets, so Australia, we're getting very deep into that. France and Germany, where we're using Motion Point. Motion Point's quite neat because you can actually sort of keep blocks of your content on different pages that are tailor-made for you, that won't get translated on the fly. So you can actually focus and use those blocks or pages to push your localized content. And so we're a small business, you know, we have 100 people in total, 25 million sales. We're not a massive brand, haven't got massive resources. So we have to be very careful where we spend that time and that resource. And so the key for us is getting a payback. And you know, we're still in the process now. We've probably got still too many dedicated websites. You know, we still need to work through from a sort of control and a financial point of view exactly the performance of some of these websites, because when I joined the business there was absolutely zero financial reporting, and we didn't have that transparency of true costs associated with each market. You know, Russia's a really difficult market. David was saying, I think it was his most difficult market. It's ours. I mean, you know, one of the key things about Russia is getting product there, getting the product to the customer, getting your money, and you know, getting that money back out of Russia, and you know, not having sort of major issues. You know, before last Christmas last year, we had a delivery that was going via Deutsche Post into Moscow, and it got held up by the police, and we had about 100 packages stolen by the police. You know, where else do you get that sort of issue and those challenges? And you know, 3 days before Christmas, you know, you've got customers there that got presents that they're going to give away, etc., and you've got to try and replace that product quickly if you can. Yeah. So you have those challenges, and so I think you just have to focus, understand, not try and bite off too many things. And I think David is absolutely right when he says he's astounded when people would say, I'm launching 32 markets, and you know, and then you find about 2 years later they've gone down to 10 or 6 or whatever it may be. To me, it's all around focus and doing the markets well and understanding which markets you're going to get traction in as a brand.
Yeah, good. One final one. On the aspect of what may or may not be worrying you about the whole Brexit issue and whatever, what are your top of mind concerns coming out? You've mentioned an opportunity, which is the currency side, but what are those key issues that you'd want to, if you could speak to Mrs. May, what would you want to say to her?
Yeah, I mean, the key thing for us is obviously, I think it's very, very positive with the pound evaluation. I think it was overvalued. I think Europe is, the whole question of Europe is, I think there's going to be a lot of changes in Europe and the euro going forward. I can't see that whole structure remaining intact, even as we leave. And I think it's very likely that the Europeans are probably going to try and make us pay for that in some respect. And I think, the whole idea of trying to keep that free trade agreement with Europe is critical. We really don't want to have tariffs going into France, Germany, etc., which are key markets for us. Germany is a big growth market for us, and France, we have a lot of traction in France. It's our second biggest international market after Australia. So we don't want to lose those markets or have a barrier at all into those markets, and I think that's the key element for me over the next 2 years. It's there is a little bit of uncertainty. I think we just have to carry on and short term, take advantage of the pound, take advantage of those opportunities, and then look at the situation in 2 years' time. But I'm definitely one for remaining duty free.
And you mentioned the EU making us pay. Do you think that will go to customers as well? Are you worried about sort of customers going, well, they're a British brand or they've got a British heritage or whatever? You're worried about that aspect as well?
I don't think so. No, I think it's more of a government thing and an EU sort of organisational issue. Okay. I think our products are fantastically designed. I think generally in retail, in terms of the UK, we have some great strengths, and you go into those international markets and you look at the customer respect that they have for our fashion business and the fashion industry in the UK. I think that overrides that completely. I don't think we'll see a backlash from customers. Okay. I think it's more from the organisational side.
Fine. Great. Thank you very much for that. Open it up to the floor. Any specific questions? Mike over here. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Chloe from Internet Retailing. You, Boss Boss, you did quite a lot about the customer, putting the customer at the centre of your business. How are you doing that at Woolovers?
I mean, a lot of the things we're doing at Woolovers is that we've never really done any customer insight, and one of the previous owner really did everything on gut feel. We were a very typical sort of entrepreneur and trader. So we've actually done a lot of insight recently, and as part of our rebranding and refresh that we launched today, a lot of knowledge has gone into that in terms of focus groups, research groups, usability groups on terms of the new web as well. And we're using a couple of usability engines as well to look at how customers are interacting with the brand. So now we have a lot more insight on the customer than we previously had. And I think one of the key things around, which is interesting for us, is one of the key things around the sort of branding work is that we now understand completely who our target market is. And as part of that, I think the whole world is changing. I went to a conference last week at Draper's, and I think it was someone from Debenhams was talking about the gen blur. So there's this whole generation blur happening out there, and I think the days of targeting a 18 to 21-year-old or a 30 to 45-year-old have gone. I mean, it's all around attitude now, as far as I'm concerned, and we now understand the attitude of our customers. We're never going to be leading fashion retailers in terms of setting the pace in terms of trend. We're very much around customers and customers that want to have a relaxed, comfortable, not standing out from the crowd, but being within the crowd type look and feel. And that's where our home ground is. And that home ground can be with a 25-year-old to a person that I spoke to on the phone. I was answering phones the other day, to a 93-year-old that was making an order on the phone. And so that whole blurring around generations is happening, and I think the whole sort of targeting and who you're looking at is more attitudinal going forward.
Yeah. People see value. They find value, don't they?
Yeah.
Anybody else?
So we're in a state of flux on URLs. So we can't do everything in the first 12 months, and we will change. That will happen next year. I think we considered it too much of a risk so near peak to actually start making that change. So we'll be looking at our URL structure going forward next year, and probably going from the one top level domain with a / type impetus for each market. But yeah, originally the whole business was set up with country specific domains.
Okay.
And mobile ones as well on top of that. Yeah.
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 How are you seeing the whole device issue? How's that playing out for you in different markets?
Yeah, I think, you know, that's all very interesting devices, and obviously, you know, it's probably the younger end of the market that's going more mobile than perhaps some of our older demographic that are still using desktop. But we are seeing a massive shift. You know, we put a responsive site in now, and that's had a massive change for us in terms of the last 3 or 4 months. And so, you know, there's definitely a move towards that sort of swipe design first. And you look at our new website, it's very, very swipe design led, very, very easy to navigate, and very, very easy to look on a mobile device, be it an iPad or a mobile phone. But yeah, it's important. I think all retailers are seeing that trend.
Yeah. Any more? Yeah.
Hi, I'm Matthew from Asylum. You mentioned Canada and the duty.
Yeah.
Do you want to just wait for the microphone?
Hello again.
Right.
You mentioned Canada and the duty issues that you'd had there, and I thought it was interesting. It's quite specific, this, so sorry, but you decided to kind of be honest and tell customers up front what the duty charges and things like that would be, which for a lot of retailers would seem like a barrier to purchase and something that would stop a customer buying from you. Did you think about trying to do something to include that in the overall price, so you weren't excluding some customers potentially, or is there a reason why you chose that approach?
So the Global E platform makes that very transparent, and we spoke about Global E providing that sort of opportunity. I think you've got 2 ways of looking at it. One, if you put the price up, there's nothing to stop that customer in Canada looking at another site that you have internationally somewhere and comparing that price and thinking, I'm getting ripped off, why are they charging me that much? I may as well go to the other site and buy on the other site, because there's probably a drop down there to deliver to it anyway. So I think, you know, you have 2 issues. I'm a great believer in being very transparent and open and honest with customers. I think that's, from a brand point of view, is imperative. And so through Global E, we provide that transparency, so the customer can very clearly see that the price is a good price for the product. And as I spoke earlier, you know, being 10 to 15% cheaper than M&S is critical for us. You know, we want to be in that price position, a better quality garment at a better price. And so that is important, and so I didn't want to lose that benchmark, and that's how Global E fitted in with the brand as well. And so that transparency is very clear. Customer knows how much it's going to cost, knows what the duty is. That duty obviously isn't coming to us, it's going to the authorities, and I think you need to differentiate that.
Good. If there's no more questions, I will not stop you all getting lunch. Thanks ever so much. That's really informative. Good case study of how you approach something so complex so quickly. So thank you very much for that. Can I just pre-bill this afternoon, 2 o'clock? We've got a session regarding implications and issues around Brexit, opportunities and threats with Professor John Ryan from LSE. So see you after lunch. Thank you.